Welcome, everybody. Just going to wait a couple minutes as everybody files in. Thank you for joining us. If you would like, you can share where you're zooming in from. It's always fun to see where people are this evening. Just going to wait a couple minutes.
Recognize some names here.
Oh, somebody's zooming in from Dearborn, Michigan.
Wonderful.
Very cool. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We are here with another program in the series of nature programs in partnership with Camden Public Library and Mid-Coast Audubon. And we only have two more left in the series this season. This one will be recorded, but it will be available to view later by link only. So if you know someone who was not able to make it, you can send me an email or call the library and request a link so they can see it later. And as usual, you can type your questions and comments into the chat or Q&A, and we'll get to them at the end. Looks like we also have someone from Vermont on the Zoom and in Brunswick. Love it when people are from all over. And now I'll turn it over to Will Broussard from Mid-Coast Audubon to tell us what's up with them and introduce our speaker.
Great. Thank you, Julia, and thank you to Camden Public Library for our nature program series. And once again, my name is Will Broussard. I'm a board member of Mid-Coast Audubon, which is a chapter of MAINE Audubon serving Lincoln, Knox, and Waldo counties in southern Maine. We support conservation through our membership, our annual popular lobster bake fundraiser at Hog Island Audubon Camp, along with scholarships and birdseed sales. And we have a number of exciting programs and field trips coming up, which you can learn more about at our website, midcoast.maineaudubon.org. Our popular Salt-Based Sundays field trips are continuing March 23rd and April 13th. And on Thursday, April 17th, we will wrap up our program series at Camden Public Library with Logan Parker from the Maine Nightjar Monitoring Project. So that should be an exciting talk. Tonight, we are joined by Amar Ayyash, the author of the recently published Gull Guide, for his popular program, Intro to Gull ID. So he'll be highlighting key identification field marks for separating our most common gull species and touching on some of the more ignored topics in gull study, such as the aging process and plumage. And we'll learn why an increasing number of people are being drawn to this family of birds and are identifying themselves as larophiles. So thank you so much, Amar, for coming out tonight.
Well, thank you, Will. I hope everybody can hear me well. I'm honored and thrilled to be talking gulls again. So if you're just now starting with gulls, you don't have any misconceptions, preconceived notions about gulls, you're in for a treat here. If you come a little intimidated by gulls, you've given them a go before, and you want to give them another attempt here, you're in good hands. So we're going to keep this introductory for the most part, but I will get into a few topics where I think it's helpful to talk about some of the nuances of plumage and just some of the terminology that we use in molt. I think it's befitting that we begin with identifying this bird in the cover slide. And I know I can't hear you, and most of you probably are yelling, black-legged kittiwake, black-legged kittiwake. So if you guessed black-legged kittiwake, that's exactly what we're looking at here. This is a first cycle bird, meaning it's in its first year of life. And some of the important field marks to notice on this bird, of course, are the black legs, but also this prominent hind collar on the back of the neck here. Black-legged kittiwake is the most abundant gull in the world. And I was just explaining before the program here that they get their name from the noise that they make. So when they make their calls, they sound like they're saying kittiwake, 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 very nasally, high-pitched kittiwake. There's two kittiwake species in the world. This one, black-legged, is definitely fair game along coastal Maine. You can see them in the fall. You can see them in the winter. If you take a trip offshore a few miles, you're going to see black-legged kittiwakes. Interestingly, this is one of our only gulls that leaves the nest with a gray back. So most of our gulls leave the nest with a mottled brownish back. They have short legs. These are true seabirds. They are pelagic. They nest on cliffs adjacent to other seabirds, and we know that they generally don't do well when they are found around freshwater. So I like kittiwakes so much. They're one of my favorite species that I decided to put one on the cover of the Gull Guide. The Gull Guide is a project that took about 6 years to complete, much longer than that as far as research and observation time. This book was released back in October. Some 500 pages of gull ID, every gull species that's ever been recorded in North America. I take every species from juvenile plumage all the way through adult plumage. And it's, in my opinion, the last gull book any adult birder will ever need here in North America. So why do we do this? Why do we put ourselves through gull ID with the multitude of plumages, their readiness to hybridize? Some are trash feeders. We can often find them right outside our doorsteps, but yet they are indeed the Gordian knot of bird ID. There's probably no other group of birds that has perplexed birders and ornithologists alike as much as gulls have. It is said that no gull species has ever gone extinct for as long as records have been kept. I think that's telling, the fact that they can survive all of these natural calamities that we have other bird populations suffering from. The gulls always seem to find a way to capitalize on every resource. In addition to no gull species ever having gone extinct, it is said that gulls are probably the fastest diversified group of birds, meaning the group of gulls has diversified genetically faster than any other group of birds. And with that presents a few problems. We have gulls in the north, Arctic gulls like herrings and glaucus and Iceland gulls and slaty-back gulls. When you look at segments of their DNA, many of them cannot be told genetically. If you look at parts of their genome, it's difficult to say whether this is a herring gull from Canada or a glaucus gull from Canada. So they seem to cluster by locality genetically. So that presents a problem for people who abide by the phylogenetic species concept, where species are defined genetically. With the large gulls, that's a problem. On the other hand, you have some populations that hybridize and behave as one species. The hybrids are fertile, the hybrids behave as a species. And so if you abide by the biological species concept, you have this problem of what do we do with what look like two distinct taxa, but they hybridize and behave as one species? Do we lump them and make them one species? Or do we just pull our hair out and try to ID the hybrids and call them hybrids? So they're a fascinating group. Overall, on coastal Maine, inland Maine, you really don't expect to see more than 3 or 4 species year round. So we're talking about things like herring gull, great blackback gull, ring-billed gull. And then in the summer months, you may get a sprinkling of laughing gulls. Bonapartes can be found in migration, some great numbers of Bonapartes actually in northern Maine. In fact, the only place Bonaparte's gull is breeding anywhere in the United States is in one little patch of woods in northern Maine. All the other Bonapartes breed in Alaska, So for the lower 48 states, Maine is kind of special in that respect, in that they have, for the last few years, Bonaparte's gulls nesting in the northern woods. And I swore I wouldn't tell anyone, so I'm not going to be able to give you a location if you ask, but they're there. Okay, so there's good news. Gulls are gregarious, they're out in the open, and they allow almost unlimited time for study, right? They're terrestrial. They don't have a problem sitting in parking lots, on beaches, and allowing us to study them. They're large birds. They're not little skulky warblers hiding behind branches and foliage. So you can make out what it is you're seeing. You can actually describe certain segments of feather tracks. Of course, the best advice anyone can give you on beginning gull ID is starting with your common species. So what are you seeing 90% of the time in your area? Are you seeing herring gulls 90% of the time? Great blackback gulls? That's what you want to begin with and get comfortable with their various plumages. So right now, mid-March into early April, most gulls are courting. They're attempting to pair bond and find some nesting grounds, right? So it's interesting now because if you see two birds close up somewhere isolated from the rest of the group, it's likely male and female. You could generally tell which one's male because they're about 20 to 30% larger than females. But come June, you're going to see fresh juveniles right off the nest. And that's a great time to start to try to get a sense of what do these juveniles look like with their first set of true feathers, and follow them for the next few months. If you have like a patch that you go to every weekend or every other day, see what these birds look like in July versus October versus December. You really start to get a sense of this variation in plumages that bewilders just a lot of birders, and that's probably the biggest challenge is there isn't just juvenile adult, right? There's this progression of molts and plumages. And once you start to get comfortable with that, with your most common species, gull ID starts to fall right in place for you. And without disturbing the birds, of course, there's no reason why you can't approach gulls. They generally allow close approach. So get as close as you can. Trying to look at something through a scope or binoculars, 100 yards out is not very enriching for me. I like to be 30, 40 feet away from gulls, and they'll generally let you if you slowly walk up on them. And it definitely doesn't hurt to drop your lunch or some dry cat food. So this is one of the best places in the U.S. to study gulls up close by the thousands. This is Daytona Beach Shores, Florida. This is part of the Space Coast Birding Festival, where we have, on a good year, 75,000 gulls on this one stretch of beach, and they're just probably 50 feet away from us right now. So we do this field trip. It's called the Gull Fly-In, where we have thousands of laughing gulls, lesser blackbacks, herrings, ringbills, great blackbacks, the occasional Franklin's gull. This is a great way to start with your gull ideas, being in a group with somebody who knows their gulls. It'll really speed up the process for you and get you right on what it is you're supposed to be seeing. This is the annual Gull Frolic on Lake Michigan. This occurs in mid-February. This is the largest gull watching event in the U.S. I happen to coordinate this event. We have Iceland gulls here, glaucous gulls. It's very cold, but it's very rewarding because the gulls come in so close here. This is what I mean by get close to your gulls. The closer, the better. And of course, being in a group that can describe for you what it is you're seeing is the best. This is late summer, early fall, a mixture of ringbills and herring gulls. So ringbills and herring gulls are considered pale gray gulls. These are not dark gulls. Ringbills as adults have yellow legs, and herring gulls as adults have pink legs. And you can see here this herring gull is maybe 20-30% larger, if not larger than that, than this adjacent ring-billed gull. People ask for diversity in gulls, and we definitely have some diversity. Maybe not the kind of diversity that you find in songbirds, but if you compare the colors on the bare parts, some are dull yellow, some are greenish yellow, some are all black, orange, but these are generally the colors that we find in gulls. Under bare parts, you're seeing yellows, reds, pinks, but that's about it. It all really, after that, comes down to what is the eye color, what is the bill shape. We should recognize 2A, for example. 2A is one of the most common gulls in the US, and that is ring-billed gull. Ring-billed gull never shows any red on the bill. That's a constant. Almost all of our white-headed gulls show some red. Ring-billed gulls never do. Right underneath it, 3A is a herring gull. Herring gull has kind of this medium-sized bill, pale yellow eye. But then a lot of these others can look like herring gulls, but there are differences structurally in their heads. For example, this one here, 5B, is a very beady eye. We call that a small eye placed high on the head. So 4C also has a small eye, and 1C also has a small eye. And so when we get these small-eyed gulls, we can narrow it down to just a few species. Opposite to that is 4A. This is a short-billed gull or a mew gull. They have a very large eye, comparatively speaking, and compared to their head size, it's a bug-eyed look, and so that right away evokes thoughts of short-billed gull. So short-billed gull, up until a few years ago, was part of the common gull complex. The common gulls are in Europe and Asia. Short-billed gull was recently split, and for whatever reason, the common gull and short-billed gull are becoming a little more common on the northeast coast. Places like Connecticut and Massachusetts are seeing them annually now in very small numbers. They're rare, but I imagine there could be common gulls and short-billed gulls on coastal Maine. It's just the coverage seems a little tougher on coastal Maine than it is in more populated areas like Connecticut and Massachusetts. So I think I'll move on from this slide, but I should mention like 2B is not a large white-headed gull. 2B is a Bonaparte's gull. So they have this ear spot right here, and they have this small tern-like bill. So these are small gulls. So is 3C. 3C is a black-headed gull. That's Bonaparte's closest relative from the Old World. And you guys, you do see occasionally black-headed gulls from Newfoundland all the way down to Virginia. So they're not completely unexpected. In the winter, they'll have this red bill base, whereas Bonaparte's keeps an all black bill. All right, if there's something from this slide you want to go back to at the end, I'm sorry I can't hear you, but just hold that thought and we'll come back to this slide 9 if there's anything you want to discuss from this slide. Learning our common species. For you guys on the coast, I think small, medium, large is a good way to put this. We have Bonaparte's, ring-billed, and herring. And again, these are all considered pale gray species. The darker things like great blackback and lesser blackback, they're going to stick out like sore thumbs because they're literally black-backed. Whereas these grayback species tend to kind of blend in. Notice the leg color on the herring gull, pink. And the ring-billed has this mustard yellow color to the legs. Bonaparte's has this orange-red color to the legs. All three of these can be found together. Different times of the year, you're more likely to see one over the other. But herring gull by far is the most common large gull in the Northeast. When we think about gulls and just how to categorize them and try to compartmentalize them by age group, something like Bonaparte's gull is considered a 2-year species, meaning it takes 2 years to become adult-like. Ring-billed gull takes an extra year to become adult-like, and herring gull takes 4 years to become adult-like. So you have to wonder, why do these gulls require that much time to become adult-like? Why isn't it something like a Connecticut warbler that is juvenile in June and then 10 months later it's an adult singing on territory and nesting? why do these gulls require, especially things like herring gulls and great blackback gull and lesser blackback gull, why do some of them require this amount of time to become adult-like? So there's some life history here. It's a form of delayed reproductive investment. These 4-year species and 3-year species, they're generalists, they're opportunistic, and so their diets are so varied. They have to spend a number of years learning how to tap into these resources. You take something like a ring-billed gull, maybe it wakes up in the AM on the coast somewhere. By noon, it's in a landfill feeding. Maybe afternoon, it's somewhere in a cornfield feeding behind a plow. And then at 5 p.m., it's back to the ocean feeding on handouts somewhere. So these birds have such general diets that they have to learn how to exploit these resources, and they can't do it in less than a year. What's interesting is Bonaparte's has a more limited diet. So Bonaparte's is almost strictly pelagic. They're feeding on crustaceans, insects, small fish, whereas the herring gulls feed on plant matter. They feed on rodents. They feed in landfills. They feed behind trawlers. So the longer it takes to become adult-like, the longer lived these birds are. So it's not unusual for herring gulls to live to 30, 35 years old. And it's not unusual for ring-billed gulls to live to about 20, 25. And Bonapartes generally live to about 15 years old, possibly 20, some of the older ones. So we're learning a lot of this through banded birds, birds that, like clockwork, keep coming back to their natal colonies. We know how long they live, and we know generally where they go in the winter. So taxonomically, gulls are not a family within themselves. They're part of this bigger family of Laridae. And so the terns, the noddies, the skimmers, these are all one family. The gulls form this Larinae subfamily. There's about 52 species under 11 genera. So in addition to thinking of them as 2-year gulls, 3-year gulls, 4-year gulls, we can think of them as large white-headed gulls and small tern-like gulls. So the bird on the left here is our largest gull in the world. This is great blackback. And the bird on the right here is a little gull. Little gull is pretty common in places like Poland, Germany, Norway. They are an old world species. They've only been in the North American continent for about 100 years. They nest in the Hudson Bay Basin. Some of them may be in the Great Lakes, but it's not very common in North America. There's only about 400 pairs, it's believed, breeding in North America. So it's a treat anytime you see them, and they usually congregate with Bonaparte's gulls. So we have two groups, large white-headed gulls, small tern-like gulls. And this is what they look like. This is in Massachusetts, Cape Cod, a juvenile little gull and a great blackback gull. Just to give you an idea of these size comparisons here, little gull is about the size of a robin, and great blackback gull is about the size of a cackling goose. It's difficult to appreciate that in this slide here, but little gull's a tiny bird, and great blackback's a beast. Great blackbacks at the top of the food chain. They are apex predators. They eat songbirds. They eat their own chicks. They eat ducks. The only thing that would really take a great blackback gull is like a bald eagle or a peregrine falcon, a really bold peregrine falcon, more likely bald eagles. So some of the more common things, herring gull, Bonaparte's gull, these were taken just this past October. Notice already this Bonaparte's has a gray back. So that's happening really fast at about 4 months old. They already start to become this gray and white adult-like. It only takes about 1.5 years before this bird becomes all gray-backed with no black tailband and looks just like an adult. Okay, whereas the herring gull is taking much longer. So these small tern-like gulls, I like to say they're among the most coveted birds in the world. If you think about things like Ross's gull and ivory gull, this is a Sabins in this slide here. Sabins is one of those species we say has an M pattern on the back. They have this divot in the tail band, kind of a forked tail. Juvenile sabins, for the most part, will go migrate south through the interior on their first southbound migration. Some of them will take the coasts, but they generally like to stay in the interior. The adults migrate pelagically off the ocean. For size comparison here, small tern-like gull on the right, that's an adult Bonaparte's, and a ring-billed on the left here. You'll notice the bill differences. This is a large bill, and this is a small tern-like bill. Bonaparte's always shows this white flash on the forewing in adult plumage. Bonaparte's is our only consistent tree nester. It's the only gull in the world that prefers nesting in trees. Like 95% of them nest in conifers. This is taken somewhere, I think in Alberta, I want to say, in a black spruce tree. This is Bonaparte's closest relative. I mentioned they have this red bill base. This bird was actually, this is the same individual that you're looking at here in a parking lot in Maryland, Baltimore. I photographed it here in, I want to say this is December in non-breeding plumage. And then 4 or 5 months later in April, I went back and photographed it again in breeding plumage. You'll notice I have these words here, basic and alternate plumage. So this is just molt terminology. And we don't typically use breeding and non-breeding with gulls. And the reason for that is because we have these intermediate ages, 2 years old, 3 years old, that might not be breeding. And so we have more precise language for gulls, and we can use this with shorebirds. We can use this with any bird. Basic plumage is this plumage that doesn't have a breeding aspect. And alternate plumage is the plumage that has a breeding aspect. And so we just think of this is the default plumage that this bird had when it left the nest. Birds in juvenile plumage are in basic plumage. And then in the spring, many of them will take on this alternate plumage. And the alternate plumage just simply alternates with the basic plumage. So it's either in basic plumage or alternate plumage. Stars here, these are heart stoppers. If you've ever seen a Ross's or ivory gull, then you are lucky. They're some of the most rare seabirds in the world. Sabin's gull is also pretty rare, but not anywhere near as rare as Ross's and ivory. Little gull is also quite rare in the New World. Sabin's tends to be one of my favorite. It's our longest migrating gull. This is an adult Sabin's here. They have this yellow bill tip, this forked tail. Like I mentioned, these things are long migrants. Their migrations are similar to Arctic terns. So they go from Arctic Canada all the way to South Africa. A lot of them go from Arctic Canada to the coasts of Peru and Chile. This map is from a study conducted almost 10 years ago now, where they fit a breeding pair with geo-trackers. So they caught them on the nest here and they fit them with geo-trackers, and they found the male actually migrated to South Africa for the winter, and the female migrated to Peru for the winter. The amazing thing about this is these birds migrated back north the following spring, and they regrouped and nested right at that same patch where they bred the year before. And this is our first example of documenting in any bird species divergent migratory pathways, where one segment of the population goes to one ocean, another goes to a different ocean, and then they regroup and come back to the same colony. We know this is pretty common now in things like red knots, in some of the geese, emperor geese, cackling geese, Canada geese. So, but this was the first example we had of it, of any bird. Sabin's gull. These small tern-like gulls, overall, if you can just nail down 1 or 2 field marks, that's usually all you need. Our field guides do a pretty good job of describing them. So a diagnostic field mark would be like an all black underwing. This is an adult little gull. But when you go to juvenile little gulls or first cycle little gulls, you have this one here. This is a little gull also, this thing. And so now it just kind of blends in with all these Bonapartes because they don't have black underwings. So lots of times with gulls, when we talk about ID features, it's usually age related, right? It's either specific to an adult or specific to a first year bird or a second year bird. Gulls don't exhibit any sexual dichromatism, so we can't tell them apart from plumage, male and female. Usually it's a matter of behavior. The larger one in the pair, we typically assign male, and the smaller one, we assign female. But most field marks that you're reading about with gulls are going to be age specific, seasonal, right? There are some field marks that we see in the winter that we don't see in the breeding season, for example. So here's a fun little quiz for you guys. These are generally going to be the biggest challenges that you see with the small gulls when they're juveniles like this or first cycle. They all share this kind of interesting head pattern with the ear spot, and they have this M on the back. So we call this a carpal bar here, this brown bar that goes across the upper wing. Carpal, C-A-R-P-A-L. You'll find that in some terns, some skimmers when they're juveniles. But if you look closely, they all kind of have different details that you don't find in the others. The middle one we should know because that's our benchmark. The middle one is Bonapartes, B for Bonapartes. And what you have is a black trailing edge all along the wing here. This is our only gull that shows black from the body all the way to the wingtip. Now, little gull is A. It tends to have more black on the cap, right on the top of the head, and that's pretty consistent. And the tail band seems to be kind of rectangular, more of a trapezoid shape than a narrow tail band. You'll also notice in little gull, they have the most prominent carpal bar. This is a very thick, continuous black carpal bar. In kittiwake, the field mark to look for here is the hind neck. So the back of the neck here has this pretty prominent hind collar. We call it a shawl or a scarf. None of the other species show this as consistently as black-legged kittiwake. They also never show black on the trailing edge. It's all white here. Okay. So I know you're thinking, if I ever saw one of these in flight, I don't know, maybe 50-50, I'd pick it out. But I think if you focus your efforts on the trailing edge, that's really useful. And then any head pattern that you can make out. Here we have a Bonaparte's on the left. Notice this all black trailing edge. And then notice this little gull has this very prominent carpal bar. So these are both first year birds. Amazingly, the little gull has already taken on a black hood and alternate plumage. A lot of them will have this patchy kind of freckled black and white hood, but some of them as early as 1 year old can have this black hood. Here they are perched. I don't know. Maybe the one on the left is the little gull and the one on the right is our Bonapartes. Again, notice how prominent this black carpal bar is. This is what you were seeing on the upper wing. We can go back here. This carpal bar on the wing panel is what you see when this bird is perched. Okay, these are the wing coverts. The wing coverts. Bonaparte's is largely gray, a little bit of faded brown, but almost never dark brown. Dark trailing edge here on the underwing. This is pretty much all I need to see to call this thing a Bonaparte's. This one has nothing on the trailing edge, but it has a pretty prominent hind collar. So we're going to go with kittiwake on this one and not little gull. And the reason being is because little gull has this tiny pointy bill, almost warbler-like, and it's not this thick bill base that you're seeing here. This happens to be a black-legged kittiwake. Some of them can have this orange brown leg color. It's kind of dull. It just depends on the year, time of year. But this is a black-legged kittiwake. We'll go on to some of the larger things, hooded gulls. You should know laughing gull because you're much more likely to see them in coastal Maine than you would Franklin's. Franklin's generally migrates through the interior. They're found in the Great Plains, the Canadian Great Plains, the Dakotas, and they nest in marshes and wetlands. Whereas laughing gull's more of a coastal bird. They're going to be on these small islands and small um, shoreline wetlands. The largest laughing gull colony in the world is actually Cape May, New Jersey. There's something like 50,000 pairs that breed there. The largest Franklin's gull colony is in South Dakota, right outside of Pierre. So how would I tell these things apart? Well, in comparison, Franklin's almost always has more black on the head in the non-breeding season. They almost always show this nice sharp demarcation. You see this straight line at the back of the hood, and they have these thick, very thick eye crescents, these white eye crescents, and it's even more noticeable when they have black hoods and breeding plumage. But the only gull that we know of that shows gray on the tail is Franklin's gull, and this is a very, very overlooked feature. If you can make out anything of the tail, you see this gray here. It's pretty consistent with adult Franklins, but probably more important is the wingtip. On laughing gull, the wingtip is generally all black and it just goes right to gray, black, gray. Whereas Franklin's has this interesting white partition. It's called a medial band. So if you're reading through a guide and you see this medial band, it's used sometimes with shorebirds and terns. The medial band is a partition between the gray and the black. So compare this middle bird to Franklin's and laughing. This is a Bonaparte's. So adult Bonaparte's is significantly smaller, but they also don't show a lot of black on the outer wing. This is a white flash on the outer wing. If you notice on the trailing edge with this Bonaparte's, it doesn't show white, whereas Franklin's and laughing have this white trailing edge. These are the tips to their secondaries. The tips to the secondaries on Bonaparte's are gray. And so I'm sure if you open up a field guide and just kind of look through these are things you can make out and point out to yourself. It becomes a little bit trickier when you're in the wrong place at the wrong time. So this is a single Franklin's gull here with a group of laughing gulls. And again, if you think about the prominent eye crescents, more black on the hood, this seems to be pretty consistent with Franklin's compared to the laughings. But also, that white partition we were talking about, that medial band, that's right here actually on the folded wing. So there's a lot of gray here on the base of this outer wing. Whereas in like laughing, it's a lot of black here. And you could see some of the other ones, they have the same thing going on. This is a laughing gull here. It has a lot of black on the base of the wing. Whereas here, these interesting Franklins will have this white partition here and the gray medial band. They're fun species. Franklins and laughing gull are each other's closest relatives. They're in the same genus, but radically different lifestyles. Franklin's is another long distance migrant. They make it to Peru. Almost the entire population leaves North America for the winter. Right now, most of them are in places like Peru and Ecuador and Chile. And then they come back in May en masse, thousands of them at a time migrating over the Great Plains. Whereas laughing gull you can find in Florida right now, coastal Texas. They don't vacate North America for the most part. A lot of them just move south and then come back north in the spring. So again, this basic plumage, alternate plumage, these are laughing gulls. I tend to favor alternate plumage. They just look a lot more interesting. But basic plumage, notice it has now this bill transformation. So these bare parts, the legs, the bill, the skin around the eye, there's this reddish skin around the eye. It's called the orbital ring. These bare parts wax and wane with the seasons. And so in breeding condition, they tend to become bright and vivid. Think of gannets, think of albatrosses, right? These bare parts are actually under strong sexual selection. So you'll have at the onset of the breeding season, when they're pairing up, they actually inspect each other's faces, they inspect each other's bills, their legs, and they kind of make decisions on, is this the one? Whereas in non-breeding plumage, where they don't need those bare parts, they become dull and then they're renewed again as we get closer to the breeding season. So right around now, this time of year, we're starting to see these vivid reds and yellows as they shift to alternate plumage. Okay. So I've been going nonstop here. We're at 6:10. I think we have, somebody can stop me, maybe 15 minutes left. I'm not sure, but I do want to leave some time for questions and answers. Before I talk a little bit about the large gulls, I want to spend just a little bit of time talking about things like herring and ring-billed and lesser blackback. I think it's very important if you're interested in this group of birds to just acquaint yourself with the feather tracks, the feather groups. And there's some people who shy away from this or are intimidated by this. Even some books that shy away from using this language with readers. I like to think of birders as intelligent people, people who are interested in learning, have no problem, splitting hairs and looking at the minutia. But this isn't minutia at all, right? This applies to every bird that you see. Birds have coverts that cover the base of the wing. So we have three tracks mainly: greater coverts, median coverts, and the lesser coverts. These back feathers that you see here on any bird are called the scapulars. And the scapulars are usually the weakest feathers and the feathers that start to get replaced first when a bird starts to molt. The tertials are this conspicuous group of feathers here. They sit right over these primaries. So this is not the tail here, P5, P6, P7, P8. These are the primaries. These are the longest flight feathers, the fingers, if you will, when this bird opens its wing. This is the tail here. The vent region, the belly, the flanks, those are also important, but probably not as important as knowing these are primaries, tail, tertials, scapulars. So you've all been listening. We're going to give you a little quiz here. This is a lesser blackback. So was the previous one. These are juvenile lesser blackbacks. They tend to be a little more solid brown on the scapulars, a little more solid brown on the tertials compared to herring gulls. So if you open up your guide and look at like the tertials and the scapulars of herrings, they're a little more patterned, a little more barred anchor patterns, whereas these are more solid brown upper parts. So we'll start with this group here, this conspicuous group of feathers. These are the tertials. And for first year birds, they're usually pretty important in identification. So the tertials on a lesser blackback are not going to look the same as the tertials on, say, maybe a herring gull. All right, we'll go to this group on the back. These are the scapulars. And we'll do some coverts now. This thicker group of coverts, the broader group, is the greater coverts. This group here, the median, and this group here, the lesser coverts. This here on the underside is the tail, and then the primaries. These primaries are generally blackish in these first year herrings and ringbills and great blackbacks. When you have the open wing, this is P1, the first primary. We number them from the inside here all the way out. And most birds generally have 10 primaries. These are the secondaries. These are also flight feathers. They're very long feathers. So these secondaries, they have their base all the way up here. They're attached to this arm bone. And the coverts just kind of cover the bases of these secondaries. The primaries also, these are very long feathers. They have their base all the way here attached to this hand, the hand bone. And these are the coverts that cover the bases of the primaries. So imagine if these coverts weren't here, if these shingles, these feathers, these layered feathers weren't over these secondaries and primaries. If you've ever owned a bird, you'd be able to see the feather shafts, the base of the feather, attached to this bone. So what these coverts do, they do a couple of things. They streamline the wing for flight, but they also protect the bases of these flight feathers, which are very expensive to make, which are very important for flight. So the things like secondaries and primaries, these flight feathers, they're only replaced once a year in most birds, whereas the coverts are replaced a couple times a year. They have this partial molt where they replace these coverts, and a complete molt where they replace them a second time in a year. So the coverts are kind of cheap. They come and go pretty fast every 6 months, whereas the primaries and secondaries, they're replaced once every year. Okay. A little quiz here. If you've been listening, maybe I'll give you your cheat sheet back. So on the open wing, and again, this is not just useful for gulls, it's useful for raptors, for shorebirds, for ducks, for every group of birds. These feathers here, this outer tract, there's 10 of them. These are the primaries. Number 1 are the primaries. Number 2 are the primary coverts. The primaries have their own coverts. 4 are the secondaries. 5, 6, and 7 are secondary coverts. So 5 are the greater coverts, 6 the median coverts, 7 the lesser coverts. These are the tertials, number 8. And then the back, this is the back here that closes up the gap between the back and the wing. These are scapulars, okay? Those are scapulars. I hope this is useful. I hope you can come back to this and test yourself. Most people who get into gulls eventually have to know the word mirrors. So I'm just going to explain this word and get close to wrapping this up. So mirrors are these white spots that you see on large gulls. Usually a gull will have 2 mirrors. Some of them have 1 mirror. But notice you could have a species with no mirrors. This top one here is a laughing gull, kind of this darker gray on the back. And then it has black to gray. Laughing gulls never show mirrors. Franklin's gulls do. The one in the middle is a herring gull. Herring gulls can show 1 mirror. They can show 2 mirrors. This bottom one here is an Iceland gull. This is a Thayer's. They tend to generally show larger mirrors, more extensive gray and less black on the wingtip. So that's one thing you'll notice. You guys get coumlines. Coumlines is a subspecies of Iceland gull. They're related to Thayer's, at least we believe they are. Coumlines has very limited black on the wingtip, but some of them could have extensive dark gray on the wingtip. But my point here is that you're seeing these mirrors not while the bird is resting. So these white spots that we're seeing on this adult ringbill, let me point that out with my laser. These white spots that you're seeing here, these are not mirrors. Those are the actual tips of the feather. Okay, and most birds have these white tips on the feathers, these large white-headed gulls. The mirrors are actually concealed when they're perched. So if you look very, very closely here on the underside of this far wing, you can see a mirror here. But you're generally not seeing mirrors unless the wing is open. Okay. All right, so I think you have a working base here. You have a lot of terminology here. We've talked about the small gulls at length, the medium gulls, things like Franklin's and laughing gull. When you get into the large white-headed gulls, the best advice I can give you, like genuine advice, is take a diagram like this, get familiar with it, and then just open up a field guide and say, okay, so what is it about the tertials on this lesser blackback that look different than the tertials on a herring? Or what is it about the tail pattern? So with these first-year birds, the most important tracks are going to be things like tertials, scapulars, and the tail pattern. If you take your most common species, great blackback, herring gull, and start to at least make out what patterns am I seeing that look different, hopefully when you see something like a California gull, or you go out west and you see something like a western gull, it immediately starts to click for you that these are the differences, not just structurally, but the patterns. So take on the adults. graduate to the first cycles. Don't shy away from some of this terminology. Saying alternate plumage and basic plumage goes a long way with birds like even bald eagles that might take 2, 3, 4 years to mature. I would never call a second year bald eagle as having breeding plumage, right? And so I hope the alternate and basic plumage sticks with you and that you use that with not just gulls, but other groups of birds. So we're about 50 minutes in here. I think what I'll do is just open it up for questions. Will, if you want to moderate or if you want me to just read them from the chat, I'll do it however you guys would like to.
We can read them out loud for sure. Thank you so much. That was very informative.
Yep,
We have a
thanks.
couple comments so far.
Yeah, Angela Burrington saying, wow, great intro. I'm looking forward to getting back to Maine coast soon to start to tackle gulls. And Amar, thank you so much. I feel that same way. I live in Cook's Corner, Maine, and in the town of Brunswick, and we have so many gulls in the local mall parking lot. And I'm looking forward to getting out and staring at them and really trying to get into the topography that you shared. That was really interesting.
Yeah, I'm kind of jealous of you guys. I live on the Great Lakes. We get gulls, but we don't have the numbers you guys have. Our most common large gull is herring gull, just like you guys. But there's places you can go on the ocean and find thousands of gulls feeding at the right time of year. We don't get those big die-offs or big nets being pulled up. So we have to kind of focus our efforts around landfills. That's where we see most of our gulls, and you can see them
Wow.
well landfills. But yeah, yours is a little more scenic, a little more nature-esque than our gull watching.
We have another comment from Catherine Carroll. She says, I've had a Mars book since it was first released, cannot recommend it enough. This presentation accompanied by the book will not allow you to remain ambivalent about gulls.
Oh, thank you, Catherine.
And then she follows with a question saying, crazy question, which is your favorite gull and why?
Yeah, so this month, my favorite gull is Franklin's. It's been for a few months. I'm on a streak with Franklin's right now. Franklin's is just a unique bird in the sense that um, they don't cannibalize one another. They don't engage in siblicide. All other gulls do. But Franklin's, on the other hand, if they see a distressed chick from like a neighboring nest, they will actually take in that chick if the parents have abandoned a nest for whatever reason, got killed or died. Franklin's gulls will adopt those chicks and actually raise them like they would raise their own. It's one of our longest migrating gulls. They migrate again to South America every year, kind of like passerines. And it's our only gull to have two complete molts. So you remember earlier when I said the primaries and secondaries are held for an entire year and the coverts are replaced twice a year? Well, with Franklin's, they do this neat thing where they get down to Peru and Chile to the Humboldt Current. And because the food is so rich there, they can afford to molt all of their flight feathers when they get down to the wintering grounds. No other gull does that in North America. In fact, very few birds go through two complete molts. I think I want to say bobolink. Bobolink is the other. So maybe you can use that as trivia on a car trip or something. Bobolink and Franklin's are our only two gulls in North America that have these two complete molts. And it's very taxing, but they have rich food sources that allow them to do that.
That's so interesting. So Ted asks, excellent presentation. Can you say more about breeding patterns and locations, for instance, islands versus shorelines?
If you could just give me a little more there. I'm not sure. I don't see the question for some reason, but if you can repeat that or just give me a little detail on what the question is.
Yeah, sure. Let's see. Oh, and that's really it, is where do we find their nests? For instance, some of the large gulls we have here in Maine
Oh, yeah,
and
yeah,
others.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so two places. A lot of them are rooftop nesters, but the majority of them are going to be offshore islands, small islands. A great place if you get down south, if you go to Appledore Island, the Isle of Shoals has several islands where they breed in the thousands, but they're mainly ground nesters on these rocky islands.
Interesting.
I have another question from Gail Presley, Mid-Coast Audubon. She says, "It seems to me like a dichotomous key might be helpful in gull ID. Have you seen anything like that?"
Um, it becomes difficult, but I've seen a few for age specific. Like, let's just talk about first year birds. You can do something like that, but the amount of variation is difficult to tabulate. Um, I've seen it with a few, like for regional lists. Let's say, for example, Southern California has like 3 gulls. You can do it there. But wide scale for multiple species, if you look in the Gull Guide, and I wish there was a way for me to pull this up. Maybe there is actually. Do you guys mind if I share something here?
Go for it.
If you have the Gull Guide, it's page 45 is where you would find this. Um, just 2 seconds here.
And if you're in Camden, we just got it at the Camden Public Library, so you can come in and look at it here, take it out.
Just two
It's
seconds.
quite a hefty tome.
Yeah, I've been told. I've been told. Page 45. Let me pull this up. So it's yeah. Let's share this. So this is a table that we put together in the Gull Guide, and it's kind of a cheat sheet just to show you what the bare parts look like, the back color. So you take something like a American herring gull, pale eye, generally has a small red goney spot, not too big. The orbital color around the eye is orange yellow. The wingtips are black. The mantle is pale, so this is the back color, and the legs are pink. You compare that to something like ring-billed. It too has a pale eye, but its bill pattern never shows red. It has this black band. The orbital ring around the eye is red. The wingtip has black. The back color is very pale compared to some of these other species, and the leg color is yellow. So we put this together, and I think we've gotten compliments about it. If you consider something like Kumlin's gull, which you're going to see in the winter, they have variable eye color. This is our most variable gull in the world, literally, not just North America, but the world. Their wingtips can go from gray to white to black. It is a bewildering amount of variation. And so it's thought that Kumlin's gull is either an incipient species in the making, or it is a result of some hybridization that's happened recently, or maybe even ongoing hybridization. But if you know Kumlins, it's a subspecies of Iceland gull. You probably are aware of the variation found not just in their eye color, but also their wingtips. So if this is something that interests you, this is page 45 in the Gull Guide.
Thanks, Amar. Could you repeat which gull nests in trees?
Oh yeah, that would be Bonaparte's. So Bonaparte's gull is due for a name change. I'm not sure if you guys have been following all the stuff with the name changes.
Yeah.
Bonaparte's gull will most likely become boreal gull.
Huh.
And the
Cool.
thinking behind this, can you guys see this slide here by any chance?
Not anymore.
Oh, I'm not sharing. Okay, sorry. Yeah, it is Bonaparte's gull, and the preferred tree is black spruce trees. Let me just find the zoom here. Sorry, guys. All right. How about now?
Yeah, that's such a cool photo.
Yeah. So that's an adult on a nest there. They build these stick nests. The adults will alternate. The male will come relieve the female, and female relieves the male. So they kind of split up their duties 50-50 with the nesting duties. Um, but yeah, Bonaparte's is our tree nester. There are other gulls that nest in trees, just not consistently. If you see it, it's probably an one-off like adult that is nesting in a tree stump or something. But consistently in trees like this, Bonaparte's is the only one in the world.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
Another question. Could you comment on the small-eyed gulls that were on your chart? Which are they?
Yeah, so small-eyed ones would be like 5B. This is Western gull. So this is the bird you're going to see anywhere you go from like Central Oregon to Southern California, even Baja. Another small one would be glaucous gull. This one here, 4C. 4C is small-eyed, and that's glaucous gull. And even 1C, this one here. This is glaucous winged. So glaucous winged gull is what you would find in the Bering Sea, Siberia, Alaska, British Columbia, Washington, Oregon. Glaucous winged gull is dark-eyed, but they're also beady-eyed. Whereas glaucous gull, 4C, this is glaucous here. This is glaucus, GLGU, glaucous gull, sorry. Yeah, that's GLGU. Not to be confused with 1C. This is glaucous winged.
Hmm.
Yeah, they do hybridize in places like Southwest Alaska, glaucous wing and glaucous gull. They're really cool hybrids, which I feature in the back of the gull guide. If this interests you, I mentioned, 4 or 5B. This is Western gull. Western gull and glaucous winged also hybridize. They form a hybrid known as Olympic gull, if you've ever heard that. If you're anywhere from, say, Vancouver Island down to Central Oregon, that is the most noticeable gull hybrid in North America. The Western glaucous wing, which they refer to as Olympic gull. And the hybrids are fertile. There's a hybrid zone where the hybrids outnumber the parent species, like literally you're just walking among a swarm of hybrids, and the phenotypes look like everything in between that you can imagine. It's just a big mess. So when birders go birding in places like Southwest Vancouver Island, Seattle, Portland, Oregon, um, they're seeing every day just hybrids. And so on their eBird checklists, everything is glaucous wing Western, glaucous wing Western. Some of them don't even attempt to point out like the pure Westerns or the pure glaucous wings because they're quite rare compared to the hybrids.
Can you tell us what all these gulls are on the chart?
Yeah, sure. 1A is Kumlin's gull. It has a pink orbital ring. It's pinkish purple. You notice that? And it has a small bill. It's pretty short. So this is that very variable Iceland gull subspecies. 1B is a slatyback gull. So they have this fierce look. They kind of look like they have mascara. This is an Asian species. It's actually colonizing North America as we speak. They're becoming more and more common on the California coast, in Alaska, on the Great Lakes. And then you guys will occasionally just get the random slatyback gull on the Atlantic. So they're fair game anywhere. We've said 2A is ring-billed, 2B is Bonaparte's, 2C is laughing gull in basic plumage. So you'll notice the bill on this laughing gull, it is not thin and turn-like. It's pretty thick compared to this Bonaparte's, compared to this black-headed gull. But this is a laughing gull, right? 3A is herring. 3B, which usually gets a lot of people's attention, has a lot of fine streaking on the head, a lot of lipstick on this gony spot here. Very pale, fierce looking eye. This is lesser blackback. 3B is lesser blackback. If you're familiar with Kevin Carlson is a bird guide author. Um, he once told me he thinks he can identify probably 90% of gulls just from the face. And that is a bold statement, but I think there is some truth to it. You can tell most gulls structurally by the bill structure, the head structure, the eye color. Even the streaking on the head is important. So, for example, glaucous wing gull, we say, has very smudgy, blotted head pattern. You'll never find very fine streaking on glaucous wing gull. But if you look at the fine details and just study them a little, they are pretty consistent from species to species. We've said that 3C is black-headed, 4A is short-billed gull, 4B is a California gull. California gull is very common all throughout the interior, the Great Basin, the West Coast, but they're rare on the Atlantic, right? So if you see a California gull in the Atlantic, you're definitely looking at a rare bird. They have dark eyes, they have yellow legs, and in the winter, in the non-breeding season, they always show this black to red pattern. And this is a seasonal field mark because I don't know, come like April, right around this time of year, they start to lose the black on the bill and it just becomes all red and yellow. But that's California gull. If you're on the West Coast, I'm sure you're going to see a California gull. Yellow legs, a little bit larger than ring-billed, but a little bit smaller than herring. This guy down here, 5A, is Thayer's gull. Thayers can have dark eyes. They can have pale eyes, like that table on page 45 shows. They're variable eye color, just like Kumlin's gull. A nice thing about Thayers, when we have them here in the winter, they usually have this greenish cast to the bill. It's not this banana yellow. It's kind of a greenish yellow cast to the bill. Okay. And then this last one right here is great blackback. Yeah. 5C is great blackback. They have thick bills, very stout. Sometimes they're blocky headed, but you can tell their bare parts are red. So they'll have red around the orbital. And then this line that you're seeing here, that's called the gate patch. That's part of the bare part. So that's skin. Some species consistently show that gate patch. Some have it covered by feathers.
And another question is, could you explain what this table, like what is it overall describing? Someone says, can you explain how this table is organized?
There's really no rhyme or reason to it.
Okay.
There's no pattern to it. It's just to kind of show a diversity of bill shape, bill colors, head shapes, head pattern.
Yeah, it's
So,
a great
yeah,
comparison.
yeah. It's bewildering to some people. If you're on North American Gulls on Facebook, or if you even just go to my page on Facebook, Amar Ayyash, this table is posted and there's a caption with all the names. So 1A, Kumlins, 1B, Slatyback. So if you're on North American Gulls, if you're not, that's an incentive to get on North American Gulls.
Will hybrid gulls, like Olympic gull, ever become their own species? And what makes that happen?
So we think with hybrids, there's one of two things that can happen. They're genetic dead ends, or they are the catalysts for evolution. And with gulls, something like Olympic gulls, time will tell. I mean, these things don't take tens or hundreds of years, they take thousands of years. And so it's very plausible to think of something like Olympic gull becoming a species. They occupy this niche from Vancouver Island to southern central Oregon, where the parent species don't thrive in that niche. So you have glaucous wings to the north, and you have western gulls to the south. And then there's this zone where the hybrids just thrive and the pure parents, the parentals, don't. And so if this continues on for millennia, there is a good chance Olympic gull becomes its own species. But you have to have enough of the genes filtering out from the north and the south. And Kumlin's gull is another one where this might be in the making. It's just so difficult for us to know because, we're here for a narrow window of this time interval where this hybridization is occurring, and who knows? It's a to be continued type thing.
Fascinating. One more question. Is there any evidence of individual vagrant gulls following the same annual patterns, or do they usually go back to normal migration patterns?
So with gulls, I talk about this in the introduction, like the first few pages. We know for a fact that vagrant gulls come back to places they don't belong. You take like a Heermann's gull in Florida, been coming back for about 5 years. There's a gray gull from South America that's been coming back to coastal Florida, coastal Alabama now for about 2-3 years. There's a slaty-back gull in Washington State, eastern Washington State, that's come back for like 8 years now. It comes back to the same dam. It comes back to the same river. It has, the webbing on the legs, on the feet. On one of the legs, it's missing the webbing. And so that's how they identify this bird. They gave it a name, but it comes back every winter. And then it leaves for the breeding season, who knows where. It could be Alaska, it could be going back to Japan, it could be going back to Russia. But there are numerous examples of vagrant gulls coming back to these sites where you wouldn't expect them to come back a second time, which makes you wonder, is this happening with other groups of birds? So with gulls, they're so conspicuous and out in the open, and we notice these things. But what about things like hummingbirds or like stellar sea eagle? Are they doing the same thing? Are they coming back as vagrants and perhaps going unnoticed?
Mm. Yeah.
Great. Well,
Oh,
this has been a wonderful.
Shrimpy the kelp gull in southern Maryland.
Shrimpy is a
Oh,
great example. That's probably the most observed kelp gull in the
that's
world.
cool.
Yeah, he was hanging
Shrimpy.
out by the seafood restaurant and they gave him the name Shrimpy. This black-headed gull right here, guys, the one I mentioned photographing in Baltimore, Maryland, it's pretty rare. But it was coming back to this place for about 6-7 years, and they nicknamed him or her Popcorn. Because birders would show up with a little bag of popcorn and it would just appear out of nowhere when you started throwing popcorn. So it was either on like a lamp post or a rooftop somewhere, just stalking birders, waiting for them to throw popcorn out. So
Wow.
yeah, these vagrants do come back year after year.
I'd come back if I got free popcorn too. So thank you so much. That was chock full of great
Yeah, it's been an
information.
honor, guys. It's been a pleasure. I hope you get out there and still catch the tail end of this winter gull season and get ready for breeding season. There's stuff to see year round. Just get out there and enjoy them.
Yeah. Got to get the gull guide.
Yeah, you got to get the gull guide.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah.
Thank you everybody for joining us. I think we're all a little wiser.
Absolutely.
All right.
Hope so.
Thank you all.
Good night,
Thank you,
everyone.
Mark.
Thank you.